G'day, Year 12. We've got an absolutely riveting topic today to cover, being water, sanitation, and health. So, what are you all waiting for? Let's get started. Okay, so syllabus dot point, pretty straightforward. Water supply, sanitation, which will lead quite well into the health of the Pompeii and Herculaneum citizens. Okay. Our main idea for today, the idea of fresh water not only is good for, socializing, it's not only good for health. One of the main things it provides is this system of luxury to the citizens, okay? There are two videos here. One of them is a Monty Python video. The second one here is a very, very short little clip of Roman engineering and the aqueducts and the movement of water. So highly suggest a watch just to kind of start wrapping your head around it, okay? You don't need to know the complete sciences or geography of moving water, but obviously a basic understanding is going to be needed, okay? Now, knowing the process of where water comes from and where it goes to is basically what you need for this dot point, okay? So, this diagram here basically shows you the process of the movement of water. It comes from and down the aqueducts. It is moved into the building known as a Castellium building, okay? Then largely it moves into three directions, okay? You've got your fountains / homes, your baths, your latrines, okay? Now, this diagram particularly is missing a water tower, but we'll come to water tower, but this is a basic diagram of the water supply for Pompeii. Here's another diagram for the movement of water. Here's a map of the Campanian region with the aqueducts moving to Pompeii. Now, Herculaneum, we are still unsure how Herculaneum got its supply of fresh water. Okay, it was on the coast, yes, but we are unsure how it got its supply of fresh water because we haven't really found all of the answers for how it actually got its fresh water. Okay, they possibly dug wells. Okay, whoops. Okay, here's a couple more diagrams and a photo. This building here is an example of a castellium. Okay, so the water would move from the aqueduct into this building. So this is quite important because see these three pipes here? That's where the water would then move on to one of its destinations. Okay, we said the water would move off to a couple of different areas. These are the pipes out of our castellium. Okay, now this diagram up here shows us that sometimes there's actually a second castellium. Okay, that's not all the time, but sometimes there was a second castellium. Okay, so here's a castellium here. Okay, this is the one for Pompeii. We have not discovered a castellium for Herculaneum. One has not been discovered. Okay, not to say that it can't or doesn't exist, but we just haven't found it. Okay. Now, in the castellium, if you're lucky enough to be this guy here and have this awesome job, the aqueducts through the Campanian region, or aqueducts wherever, they didn't always have a cover. So you have to think sometimes the water along the way is going to collect absolute crap, leaves, branches, whatever. Okay, this guy here, his job is standing in the castellium and basically fishing out the rubbish and the crap that builds up there. Okay. All right. Well, what I want you to think about is if you've got sloping terrain where the water is coming down the aqueduct or even from the castellium, okay, have a think about the water pressure or the speed at which the water's actually moving. Okay, it would actually be quite significant. So these water towers are put in place to regulate the flow of water, kind of slow down and control the water pressure. Okay, they're quite tall. We found about 14 in Pompeii and about 3 in Herculaneum. So as I said, water towers have been discovered in Herculaneum, but not Castelliums or where they've got their fresh water from. Okay. I think I doubled up on some information here. Yeah, I did. This dot point I've doubled up on, so I'm going to move over to the next page to do it. Okay. Quite interesting. There may have been Wallace Hadrill, who we covered briefly for housing. He discovered on a water tower that there may have been some evidence that of seismic activity prior to the eruption. So maybe there were some warning signs that people in Pompeii and Herculaneum were unsure about, particularly Pompeii, prior to the eruption, because when they excavated a water tower, they saw that there was some evidence that that water tower, it had been dug up and people had been doing some work on it. So the thought process being maybe there was a problem with the flow of water to this water tower prior to the eruption, which may have been, issues in the ground. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, feel free to ask me about that when we all catch up. This is the water tower here. This is a fountain, which we'll come back to in a second. That's the water tower in the background. Okay, public fountains. Guys, there were plenty of fountains out and about. Okay, we got 42 fountainheads identified in Pompeii. We found about 3 in Herculaneum. Water channels, interlead pipes under the pavements went all around the town and larger houses. And these fountains, they had 24-hour access and flow of fresh water. That's pretty incredible. Okay, so what this historian's saying is even the poor who didn't have indoor plumbing could actually enjoy fresh water from the mountains. Okay, that is pretty outstanding because now you've got equal access to fresh drinking water. Allows you to have fresh water to be hygienic, like not only the baths, but like just fresh water in general. Okay, that's pretty amazing for health as well. Okay, and some of our fountainheads are pretty, pretty nicely built and structured, sculpted. Okay, so this photo here's got some of our really nice ornamental fountainheads. Okay. The other thing as well, this would have been a bit of like a social place as well. Like this is the ancient like water cooler, like have catch-ups around the water cooler. This would have been a place where people lined up to kind of fill up their containers or get fresh drinks or whatever else from a fountain that flowed for 24 hours a day. Okay. Also consider as well, like these fountains would have overflowed. Okay, so we will come back to it, but like the around here would have been incredibly slippery. And yeah, so they've got stepping stones in the background here, so you didn't have to walk on the wet ground. But this would have been really, really slippery and wet along here. This side of the fountain here, it's actually been worn down from people placing their hand in to lean over and fill up their vessel. So we've actually got an actual groove here that has been worn down from people putting their hand over. This is our fountain from the Palestra in, I believe it's Herculaneum, the serpent that Hercules killed supposedly. We had each fountain coming out of each of the serpent's mouths. So we do have fountains and things that would have had fresh water to it in Herculaneum, but as I said, we just don't know. We don't have a comprehensive idea on how Herculaneum got the fresh water. And again, like look how pretty this stuff is. Like again, this idea of luxury. All right, based straightforward water delivery through pipes. We've got an extensive amount of information and evidence of our lead pipes under the pavements. Okay, we've got some hydraulic valves here, which are also used to regulate water flow into private houses. Okay, the wealthier people could actually afford direct water to their houses. Okay. Don't think there's anything to cover for that. All right, this is a picture here of a huge swimming pool, the Villa of Oplontis, a 60-meter long swimming pool. That is absolutely massive. And you have to think, if you don't have a fresh supply of water, the water goes pretty manky pretty quickly. Okay, so the 60-meter long swimming pool, you have to have a mountain of cash, a mountain of moolah, in order to have a 60-meter swimming pool. Okay. Okay, so we've got some more examples here of private homes connected to a water. Here's another, valve. These lead pipes in the house of Vedi. Okay. Oops. Oh no. So we've got a picture here. We believe there's piping along here, which is delivered to a little, fountain here. And have a go at this one. This would have been a fountain with the mosaic behind it. So that would have actually been a flowing fountain as well. How good's that? Again, it's this idea of fresh water equaled luxury, okay? Okay, industries used water as well. We've got a system on the roof here for drainage of water, using rainwater as well. We've also, the idea of bakeries and things like that using fresh water for hygiene and things like that as well. Okay, laundries for dyeing and washing clothes and stuff. Okay. So there's a connection here with economic factors and the use of water, okay? All right, private houses. Pretty straightforward, guys. Obviously, especially the wealthy who may have had indoor plumbing, quite useful for baths and toilets and stuff like that. Okay, some people were able to kind of capture their water in their impluvium. You could move that on sometimes to water your garden, so you could sometimes have a really, really nice garden if you were able to have that access to fresh water, or at least have a good system of moving that water to somewhere else. Oh no, I think I've skipped one. Yeah. Okay. We've got some examples here on the curb, some drain holes here. So the pipes would move the water from some of the private houses that were lucky enough to have them into the street. Now, what you have to think about is, if you've got water from houses going to the streets, water from fountains going into the street, sometimes it's quite hard for that water to drain away. So we do have drainage problem, or evidence of drainage problems in Pompeii. Okay, especially when some of that flow contains sewage. Does that make sense, guys? So even before one of the photos I showed you, there were stepping stones because, there was that kind of gives us the idea of, especially when people are taking animals through there as well. You'd have animal excrement and human excrement through the streets that are being drained into the streets as well. Okay. So those stepping stones on the photo I showed you before allowed you to cross the street without actually having to step in it. Herculaneum, by comparison, much better drainage. Okay, we've got a pretty much a downward slope to the sea. We do not see things like stepping stones and stuff like that in Herculaneum, which pretty much gives us an idea of there wasn't a need for stepping stones, as the drainage and the movement of water was potentially more efficient in Herculaneum than it was in Pompeii. So we've got our decline there where the water would have come down. All right, sanitation. Okay. Largely healthy places to live, Pompeii and Herculaneum, especially for their time. We've got public latrines. We've got some degree of toileting. We do have toileting without water, and you would have had some people who didn't have indoor plumbing kind of just chucking their literal crap out into the streets. There may have been a job with a person that came around to different houses and collected it on a wagon as well, potentially as well. Okay, or they've chucked it out the window, sometimes illegally done that. Okay, and little fun fact, we've got our toilet paper today. We're all worried about toilet paper in the year 2020, but guys, let's just, use a sponge on a stick. Okay, here's a public latrine. And here's a house latrine, a private latrine with a wealthy person's house. With sanitation, guys, I know I'm jumping back a little bit. We do have some evidence that from Herculaneum that the dumping of human waste was an issue. Okay. All right. That pretty much does sanitation. Okay. So, look, there have been short answer questions on water supply in the past. Understanding the delivery of water to from where it's coming from through the Castellium to the various places, and its importance for lifestyle, and citing some evidence to support your knowledge. That's your basic idea you want from this. All right, we are now on to health. Okay, so our main idea, largely speaking, our health of Pompeii and Herculaneum is quite good. Okay, and it links to a couple of dot points, which I'll go over in a second. But we've got our ability to investigate the health has changed over time, and that has also meant our understandings and interpretations have changed over time as well. Excuse me. Here are some dot points. There's a crossover of health into a lot of other dot points, okay, which will become apparent throughout. All right, investigating health. This photo here is like a rock star of archaeologists named Estelle Laser. She is an Australian historian, very, very renowned in her field. Like a lot of historians know her name. For example, I was lucky enough, the school brought Estelle Laser out to the school a couple of years ago, and I was able to sit in while she talked to the year 12s, and I was like, oh, this lady's cool, she knows her stuff. And then when I spoke to other teachers from other schools and said, oh, Estelle Laser came, and they're like, Estelle Laser, she's a rock star. So she's very, very widely known. At the time, I didn't realize how famous she was. Miss Stavola and Miss Brenner all went and got her autograph. That's how in awe of her they were. So look, investigating health. We try and find a few things here out by the bodies that are left. Things like the age, sex, height, diseases they may have had, their dental health and general health that is left over from their skeletal remains. Okay, this is a photo here of Estelle Laser looking at disarticulated skeletons. Disarticulated, meaning skeletons that have been pulled apart. Okay. During a process of early, and so this is not Herculaneum. I know you can see skeletons here. Don't mix her up with Sarah Bizek from Herculaneum, okay? We did find some skeletal remains in Pompeii. Anyway, during a process of excavation, there was little thought given to their importance, and we had some skeletons being like put together as like a bit of like a ghoulish, ghastly display in some homes. You had some skeletons just kind of chucked together, and she kind of, her big job of hers, that she took on, was to try and put hundreds and hundreds of skeletons back together to their rightful body with their rightful parts. So you can imagine how finicky and time-consuming that job actually is. Okay, especially she wasn't allowed to use a lot of technology. It was deemed a little bit too invasive for the time. This has been relaxed quite a bit now. Okay, so going back to Sarah Bizek as well, not Beisel. She did a lot of work on the skeletons, on the discovered skeletons in the boat sheds at Herculaneum. Okay, so remember, people thought that everyone in Herculaneum got away, and she obviously proved that no, that wasn't the case. And she was also able to prove that they died of thermal shock, that intense heat that splattered their brains. Okay. She was also, Sarah Bizek was also able to show that the remains in Herculaneum wasn't just like one group of old and sick, but it was a good cross section of Herculaneum society. This is a scale. This is a remain from the Lady of Oplontis. Okay. So something to think about as well, and this comes up on a dot point later on. The ethical questions. Okay, so and have a think about it. Should we be looking at these skeletons? Should we be, studying them for their health, for diseases and stuff like that? Is it ethical to do that? I mean, not only should we be giving them a proper burial? Should we just leave them exactly as they lie, where they fell? That's where they should be left. Or is it okay that we take some of these skeletons and study their teeth and study the bones? And what you have to think about as well, sometimes damage has to be done to some of these skeletons in order to study them properly. And when you think about scrapings of the teeth and things like that, so is that okay? It's just something to think about. Is it ethical that we do this? So as we've studied these skeletons, guys, and as technology changes, we've also been able to change and find new understanding, or at least challenge our old understandings. Okay? Even in Pompeii, there was a thought and idea that the old and the sick were left behind. Well, Estelle Laser and studies were able to debunk that. Okay? They were able to debunk the idea that, well, no, it wasn't just the sick and the old and the infirmed that were left behind. Okay? What we can find from our remains is the health is generally quite good. They had a good diet. They had access to food. It's very fertile there, so they can grow things. They can, there's plenty of food to go around. And when you've got plenty of food, that means it's cheaper. So they've got not only plenty of chance to grow food, but they've got plenty of chance to buy food as well. Your fruits, your veggies, your seafood, because you're on the coast and rivers, and also a different variety of meats. Okay, of meat too. So the people are in a fairly good health. They've got a good access to food and a nice balanced diet. We do have some evidence of worn teeth, and we believe there's a link here with through the process of making bread at the time, the milling process. We've got some wearing down of the teeth, potentially from grindstones in the bread, okay, that they ate. Yeah, we've got some evidence of diseases, but nothing major in particular. We've got got good supply of fresh water and sanitation, bathing habits. All of these things equal a pretty good health for the citizens. Okay, and that says Beisel again, which really annoys me. Bizek found the skeleton of the slave girl, who I'm pretty sure we've spoken about before. What she was able to find is there are examples of slaves with some wear and tear in their bones and joints, okay, which would indicate that they've had quite a lot of hard, strenuous work of a slave in their life. So you can sometimes, their bones and joints can give away the types of work that they did. Okay, obviously, if you were the really, really wealthy or a politician, you're probably offloading that work to your servant or servants. Okay, making a connection to health and food is a really good thing to tuck away if you were to ever get a response on it as well. And don't forget, your natural resources and geography then plays a part to their health as well with their access to food. And guys, again, like, we've got to do these studies, but is it ethical to do that? What we've found, all the amazing discoveries we found, was that worth it from these invasive technologies and working on these skeletons? I know how I feel about it. How do you feel about it? Okay. All right, last slide. Look, it appears with the NASA sample paper, it appears that they are trying to make a question that integrates multiple dot points. Okay, so it is very possible that they could link in things like health to geography, or health to water supply, or health to ethics or changing interpretations. Okay. Now that there is no multiple choice, they may try and find a question surrounding this idea. They could even do something like, do these sources provide a comprehensive picture of the health in Pompeii and Herculaneum? Which all of you know now, no set of sources can provide you a complete picture. Okay. Look, I'm pretty sure I've covered just our basic idea here. And if you've got any questions, just keep them in mind and we can discuss them all together. Have a good one, guys.